Take a seat.
I mean, that is why I explained earlier about the challenge of this particular flu virus versus SARS, because there will be cases which have no symptoms and yet who can just slip through the borders, even with the best of efforts. And that's why it's so important on two parts. One is the travelers themselves to just watch, your own health. If you turn fluish, please go and see your doctors immediately. Don't just shrug it off, so that you protect yourself, because Tamiflu can help protect you, and you also protect the rest of the community. Yeah. And secondly, I think we have to be alert and so on, and be mentally prepared that a local cluster may just crop up even as we speak. So we should not be shocked if there is a local cluster that were to crop up. Key point is we can identify the cluster as soon as we can, and that requires cooperation by the patients themselves.
Over there, yes.
Assuming that from Bloomberg.
Can you come to a mic? You have a microphone? No, go ahead.
Sorry, I've got a loud voice. Minister Kaur, can you first of all confirm that the 3 cases on which you're awaiting further test results, first of all, are they H1N1 untypable? Second, where are those samples being tested? Is it at the WHO collaborating centre in Melbourne, or here in Singapore, or somewhere else? And when do you expect results from those tests?
I think these patients have just come into the health test system, so it's very the initial test of even identifying whether it's an influenza A. And these tests.
The 3 patients whose results are pending are actually cases who, it's just their very initial testing to see whether it's an influenza A. So we haven't even come to that point of determining whether it's an influenza A. And all the tests, those kind of tests can actually be done locally.
And if they are confirmed as flu A, will they then be sent on to a WHO?
No. If they're identified to be flu A, then we proceed to see whether they are one of our circulating strains. And if they are, as in most of the cases they were, then they would not be classified. But if we find that they are not one of those circulating strains, then it'll come to the diagnosis of a probable case definition of untypable influenza A.
And what does your release said yesterday that it takes 7 days to clear someone of swine flu? That's in your statement yesterday. Can you clarify that one? And also, when can we expect the diagnostic kit to be ready? Because we're ready with it, we're waiting for some go by.
I think 7 days is just the incubation period. People can, the incubation period can be as long as 7 days. So from someone who's returning from overseas, they should watch for symptoms up to 7 days after their return.
So you're putting them in the CDC for 7 days?
No.
I think I understand what you're trying to ask. So when a patient comes in and we have established that it's a suspect case based on the history and the symptoms, we then go ahead and start doing our laboratory tests. In the first instance, we establish whether the patient has got influenza A, and then whether it is typable, which is either H1 or H3, which is the current circulating strain. That will take us, and we repeat this on the following day. So it will take us about a day to complete it, and the H1, H3 typing would take us another day. So by about the second or third day we have done that. But if it is non-typable, then we will have to now do genomic sequence. And that genomic sequence is going to take us another 3 days. Because currently we don't have the primers in Singapore to do these specific testing for that specific strain of this swine influenza for H1. And hence we are now more depending on the genomic sequence to establish the identity of any suspected or probable case in Singapore, to establish it as a case of swine flu.
Follow-up to that. So how do you know that those 3 cases are not swine flu?
We are in the process of testing. We have not gone into the process of even establishing them as non-typable. First, you must establish it is influenza A, and then it is non-typable. Then it becomes a probable case.
Actually, we don't know whether those 3 cases are or are not.
Not yet. Yeah, we have not established that. But once we establish that as a non-typable influenza A, then we will proceed. Genomic sequence.
Which we don't have yet.
Oh no, genomic sequence we have. That takes us about 3 days to do. That's why you add all that, it comes to about, by the time we do it and we come up with the result, it'll take us about 7 days. That's why we have said that. But if we are supposed to do a PCR, which is a laboratory test that we now currently use to identify the circulating strains like influenza A, H1 or H3, to do that laboratory test, you must have a specific primer. And that primer has just been designed and synthesized in Singapore, and we will now start having to use it. But to use it too, you need to have a control, which means you must have specimens in Singapore, and this is something that we are waiting from WHO laboratories. It'll probably take us, probably by this week or next week, we should be able to get the specimens and the necessary details from WHO laboratories.
Those are very important, useful questions that you just raised, and I'm sure there will be opportunities to explain. But really, if we have a swine flu case, then I believe that the competence of the health officials will be able to say, yes, we have, or we don't have. But if you go into a lot of details about whether we have the ability to do that and whether we need to send to WHO, etc., I can assure you that we'll do our best to make sure that we have the right standards and meet the standards to determine whether the case is not. While Mr. Koi and I are here, if there are other questions that you would like us to answer, maybe I'll take a couple of questions, and then because we have another meeting to go back to, so maybe 2 questions. Yes, Seng.
Can you share more light on the ministerial policy? How many ministries have been activated so far? You know that this did involve like 5 ministries and design office builders. And also, what are some of the operational measures for the war, for instance?
So what?
War.
What?
To, from which to activate measures.
Every ministry has its operation center. Like Health Ministry, for example, has its operation center, and so has MHA and other ministries that take part or will get involved in this. Most of the ministries are involved in the home front crisis setup, and depending on the type of crisis, we'll have different components of it, picking up more of the staffing as well as the ministers. For this particular one, apart from me and Mr. Kaur, we have the Minister for Transport, we have the Ministry for Home Affairs, and we have the MICA, National Development, NEA, Education, MINDEF. Whoever missed any. I think these are the key ones. And if there's need to involve others, we bring them in as well. But at the officials level, there are many details that we need to work on, and actually there are many more agencies. It's not just the ministry alone, but also the agencies like AVA, for example, who will also be involved in these discussions and the planning.
I have a crucial question. I know that from the last crisis, because China covered up and stuff like that, we learned that it's important to be transparent, that these conferences, press conferences are important. But since we also want people to avoid crowds, should we not, 6 years on now, try to organize this on the web? Having us all here. Some of us here might have a bug already.
Well, we can definitely find many ways of communicating, but I think presume that you are quite healthy and nothing like a face-to-face conference. But if there is a transmission in Singapore, you can be sure that we will not be arranging something like that without proper temperature clearance. Okay, one more question.
Derek from today. It seems that the message from Mr. Koh and yourself to Singaporeans is to be vigilant, be alert, but don't go overboard. In other words, don't panic. How important do you think it is at this time to balance the message, to go about life as usual with this swine flu occurring? Because you said we are not going to stop anyone from coming into Singapore. Is there any concern about economic impact, about panic on Singapore?
Definitely you must go about your life as usual, but at the same time be vigilant and take the necessary precautionary measures and high standards of hygiene. We don't want to close our borders at this stage because if there is indeed an effective transmission among human to human, nothing we can do can stop it from happening in Singapore. And Singapore being such an open society, it may happen in Singapore. And therefore we just have to make sure that we are well prepared at the medical level, at the community level, and so on. So we will do as much as we can to deal with this. Well, I can't tell you exactly what percent it will hit us, but definitely if there's a restriction in travel, or even it's a concern on travel, you may see a drop in tourist arrivals. You may see Singaporeans wanting to spend time more in Singapore than to go overseas. And definitely there will be concerns about its impact on the economy. But at this stage, I think we should stay vigilant and let us not be alarmist and therefore paralyze ourselves and not do anything. When we have fewer visitor arrivals, we've got to find other ways. Just hunker down and ride this over.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we have to stop here because the ministers have got an appointment. Thank you very much for coming.
Take a seat.